Welcome, everybody, to Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor's monthly program called Rabbi Sam Silver Controversial Issues, or better known as Parson to Parson. With us, we have starring co-hosts Rabbi Barry Silver and Pastor Fritz Aufdencamp. Today is January 16th, 2023. It happens to be Martin Luther King's birthday, a national holiday. And with that, I will turn it over to you two gentlemen to lead us in a wonderful discussion tonight. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thank you, Sharon, for organizing this. I also want to thank Stanley, our president. He felt that we should dedicate this discussion to Martin Luther King, and I readily agree that obviously would be most appropriate. We might venture off in other topics, but I think that would be great. I love to speak about Martin Luther King. He was so inspiring to so many people. And so it's going to be a good topic of conversation. I have a few things about him that most people might not know that you may find interesting. So let's begin with Pastor Aufdencamp. I'll have you go. You can start out, and then I'll pick up the pieces after you're done. Go right
ahead. Yesterday at our worship service, I learned a couple things about Dr. King that I did not know before. In an interview with Coretta in the early 90s, she said that she and Dr. King attended Unitarian Fellowship. And they were very much in line with the Unitarian thinking, but he realized that if he wanted to have a movement within the Black community, the Black community are Baptist. And you've got to really identify with the Baptist churches if you want to have them behind you in this movement. But I found that interesting that he and his wife had attended Unitarian churches.
Now, I'll tell you something else that many people don't know. His original name was not Martin Luther King. His original name was Michael. By the way, I got this jacket yesterday at the South Florida Fair. I recommend it to everybody. It's a Native American. I love Native American culture. And I think Martin Luther King was really someone who celebrated all different types of cultures, including Native Americans. So I just got this. And I'm also broadcasting from the home of the former president of Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor, my brother Noah Silver. I'm over at his house. He's a great host. He's got a nice fire going outside, and he's going to watch the football game. And it's really great over here. And he was kind enough to set up his computer for me. So Martin Luther King's name originally was Michael. And then according to what I read, his father was he was a minister as well. And he went to Germany, and he learned a lot about Martin Luther. And so he changed his name and his son's name. He became Martin Sr., and his son, Martin Luther King Jr., and Martin Luther King never changed his birth certificate until he was probably in his late 20s. And then he actually officially changed the name on his birth certificate to Martin Luther King Jr., and that's how we know him today. What was very interesting is that his father went over to Europe and was really appalled by what he saw regarding the anti-Semitism. He studied it and learned about it, and he was quite shocked. And it's kind of interesting, maybe he didn't learn too much about the influence of Martin Luther on anti-Semitism. If he knew the connection.
He didn't.
He probably not. He probably
That's right. That's
her name, because Hitler pretty much patterned his draconian measures against the Jews based on Martin Luther, who, by the way, Martin Luther originally loved the Jewish people. He wrote about how wonderful the Jews are, and he said, of course, they wouldn't want to convert to Catholicism. Catholicism is so corrupt. He said, I'd rather convert to become a pig than a Catholic. So then he said, but I'm sure the Jews are going to like my brand of Christianity. I have a new and improved brand. I'm sure they're going to like mine. And he presented it to them. And the Jewish people said, yeah, it's very interesting. That's nice for you guys, but we're still happy being Jewish. And then That was the end. It was like unrequited love, like a spurned lover. And he wrote then of the Jews and their lies. But Martin Luther King, there's something else that I have to share with you that you probably don't know. And I find this to be very interesting. So many of you know that my favorite TV show of all time is Star Trek. Well, I didn't realize that Martin Luther King's favorite TV show was also Star Trek. He told his daughters that they could not stay up late to watch any show except for Star Trek. He loved the show. I think because it portrayed the world as it could be in the future, where humanity got over racism and intolerance, and all humanity was working together on a common goal of exploration. So according to the story that I've heard many times, is that Uhura met Martin Luther King at some event, and she said to him, you know, I like playing Uhura, but I'm going to leave. I'm considering leaving Star Trek because I want to go and do other things in movies. And according to the story, which I've heard repeated many times, Martin Luther King said to her, no, please, please don't leave. You are an inspiration to my daughters and to women everywhere. Your show is the only show where there's a woman of color who is represented in some way other than as a maid and with dignity and equality and respect. Please don't leave. And because of that, she stayed on as Star Trek. And then, according to another thing that I heard, Whoopi Goldberg was watching Star Trek and saw Uhura and came running into her mother and said, Mommy, Mommy, you gotta see this show. There's a black lady on and she's not a maid. You gotta come out and watch. And she came out and watched the show with her mother. And from the time she was a little girl, she said, I want to be on Star Trek. And then when she got older, became an actress, there was another iteration of it, the Star Trek Next Generation. And she played Guinan on Star Trek. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this show was very, very inspiring about the world, what the world could be. And Martin Luther King had a dream. And you could say that his dream seemed to be realized or materialized in the show of Star Trek, which is, and that's why it's so inspiring to so many people. Fritz, go ahead, share with us.
He should like Carl Sagan then too. Well, he should like Carl Sagan then also, I would think.
Yeah, yes.
Did you share that this afternoon at your speech, with your speech?
I should have. I felt bad. I only had 3 minutes.
For you, Barry, I don't know how you limited yourself to 3 minutes. How did you do that?
I'm not sure how I did it either. They said you got 3 minutes. So I said, well, it takes me 3 minutes to clear my throat. I don't know if I can do that. But after I was done, I realized I should have used that story instead of all the other stuff that I said. But yeah, I didn't share that, but I probably should have. Yeah, I'm very.
I have 2 blocks.
You know, if you tell me you get 3 minutes, I don't abuse it. I take my 3 minutes, and that's all I took. And I figured there was other stuff I had to get in.
Yeah. I have 2 black brother-in-laws, so they have taught my white German family a lot about racial prejudice. And I use them. In fact, I just sent an email to my family because my family is still trying to convert me into going to heaven with them. And I said, you know, Chet and Anthony have greatly helped our family overcome racial prejudice, but we still have a lot of religious prejudice in our family. And if I'm trying to make this connection to help them see how similar they are, but it's been a struggle.
Yeah, I saw a pretty dark comic on the internet. I was with a friend of mine today. We were walking around. We went to the fair yesterday, and today we're at Del Rey. So he showed me this, I guess this comic on the internet, and it's like they're showing Fox News, and they said, "Oh yeah, we celebrate Martin Luther King too." So they said, "Well, why aren't you celebrating today? Today is his birthday." They said, "No, we don't celebrate his birthday. We celebrate the day he was shot." I mean, there are some people There's some people who don't really seem to appreciate the lesson of Martin Luther King, and even pay lip service and say, "Oh yes, we celebrate Martin Luther King." But do they really understand what he was all about? Do they really emulate him and follow his example? Because one of the things that Dr. King said that was very powerful, he wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail, and he said, even more dangerous and pernicious than the KKK and the overt racists, he said, are the white Christian moderates, the one who say, "Oh yes, we're all for equality too, but not now. No, not now, and not the way you do it. You create too many waves. You got to learn to get along with people and not be so divisive." And he wrote from his jail cell that type of attitude does incalculable harm, because you should not tell other people what the time frame is for their liberation, or tell other people that they should be content to live as second-class citizens until the time is right. When is the time right? And you can say the same thing today regarding the horrible conditions in Iran that women are suffering over there. Why don't we mobilize more fully and support them as they're being tossed into jail and killed? Why don't we more fully support the people of Ukraine as we continue to buy oil from Russia? Maybe not in the same amount as before, but we continue to prop up that regime. When is the right time to actually take a strong stand and to repudiate this type of evil, and to say we're going to find an alternative source of energy so we never have to buy any oil, any of it, not a drop, from Russia or Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or any of these countries? When is the time that in our own country we're going to address some of the inequalities and the fact that some people can work their whole lives and get sick and then they become bankrupt because they can't afford health care? When are we going to address these inequalities where the wealthy have access to health care and those who are not wealthy don't? What Martin Luther King was all about is that we shouldn't put off these struggles for civil rights and equality. We should do it now. And if we want to follow his example and celebrate his life, not just commemorate his death, then we should be all about making these changes now. We should all become rabbi rousers if we're Jewish, or we should be pestering pastors if we're Christian, and we should stir things up. Would you agree with that, Fritz?
Absolutely. Our pastor preached a sermon yesterday on the letter from the Birmingham jail, and she also shared that there were a number of clergy, Black clergy as well, who wrote Martin Luther King a letter saying this was not the way to go about doing it.
Yeah, well, we get that all the time in the Jewish community also. You know, stop making so much noise about Israel, and you're going to get people, you're going to create a backlash. Sadly, it happened during the Holocaust, where Jewish people were told, tone it down. You don't want to speak about the Holocaust because people are going to think that we're fighting World War II to save Jewish people. That would be a horrible thing. If they thought we were fighting in World War II to save Jews, then that would cause people to turn against the effort to be involved, and it would cause people to want to get out. I mean, it's so ludicrous. It's so crazy that you would say, well, we can't mention that Jewish people are dying, so we have to hide that fact. It's just the way some people think is crazy. We need to confront these evils head on, and not with a glancing blow.
My brother sent me a letter, an email, because he had watched a Black Baptist service yesterday, and he said, these people seem very happy. I didn't see any hatred, no divisiveness in this worship service. They've been doing this for 100 years. So I don't know what you're talking about, Fritz, about this hatred or division that's going on, because I just didn't see it at all. And I said, well, yes, Jerry, within every tribe, you go to a Nazi party and they're going to have respect among each other. And it's just not within the tribe. It's when the tribe moves outside of the tribe when you're going to see the conflict.
It's just that there's some people that don't want to see. And so they pretend everything is fine.
Yeah. This Thursday, I'm going to speak at the Interfaith Cafe, and I'm going to use the title of your book as my presentation about evolution, not necessarily scientific evolution. I'm going to talk about spiritual evolution, how spiritually and religiously we have in many ways, but need to evolve even much more so than we already have. We don't stone women anymore when caught in adultery. We have evolved past that. But there are some issues that we have not evolved to yet. We still condemn people who are
success as human beings, survival of the fittest, the fact that we've changed and adapted. If we're the same way today as we were 100,000 years ago, we'd be in bad shape. So I think that's great that you're speaking about that, about using the human mind to grow and adapt and evolve. The other thing for King is that he saw the big picture in the long run. He had patience and was willing to work hard and make sacrifice for change. And in his famous speech, right before he died, he said, "I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I don't know if I'll get there. I'd like to live a long life, but I don't know if I'll make it," because he had his life threatened so many times. He said, "But I feel good today." And we can also take some comfort in that. If we're fighting for a good cause, if we're doing the right thing, people say, why bother? You're never going to accomplish anything. Well, maybe we ourselves won't get there to the promised land, but maybe we and others through a chain reaction can help move and advance humanity towards that day. And that's really what his legacy is all about, is that we want to be moving in the right direction and helping humanity move forward, even though we may not get to see the ultimate triumph of getting to the promised land.
Yeah, I get this all the time when I talk about removing condemnation from Christianity, and they say, "Fritz, that'll never happen. We like our hell so much, we'll never get rid of it." Well, we will see. We will see.
Yeah, well, Martin Luther King didn't focus on that at all. That wasn't really his.
That was not an issue.
He did not focus on life after death. He focused on this life and this world, and his message was for the living. And that's why he was such a powerful leader. Imagine if Martin Luther King spent all his time, like so many ministers do, talking about, well, you got to believe this, and then you'll live happily ever after in heaven. But what does that get you? There's no evidence of this. You can't benefit from this by making things up about what happens after you die. It's this world that counts, and that's why he was such an effective leader. He cared deeply about this world and about injustice here. And another thing he has so many amazing quotes. One of the quotes I really like is that he said, "Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere." And I'm reminded of that because of our struggle for women's rights. Women don't have the right in Florida anymore to have free access to abortion. And many people think that's a woman's issue. Well, obviously it affects women, but men should be very, very concerned about that as well. Hopefully all of us have women in our lives that we love and cherish, but we also as a society are degraded when women don't have access to healthcare and to control over their own reproductive system. That affects everybody. So his comment, "Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere," is very relevant. And that's why the National Organization for Women, I'm very honored that they named me the Feminist of the Year. And I, in turn, am turning around and asking all the men in our community to join now and to send a message that we stand in solidarity with the women of the United States, with the women of Iran, with the women throughout the world who have been treated as second-class citizens, often due to the influence of religion. And I'm calling upon the men of Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor and elsewhere to stand in solidarity with women as one for abortion rights and equal rights. The National Organization for Women does not just protect women's rights, but they also stand up for the environment, and they stand up for good causes. So injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And the other quote that he said that really, really resonates with me, and probably with you too, Fritz, is his comment that in the end, we don't remember so much the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. You take a stand. You take a strong stand.
Yes.
For love and acceptance and tolerance. And what happens? Do you get other people joining with you and saying, right on? Or do you hear a loud, deafening silence of your friends as you take on the status quo, and most people are just going to let you twist in the wind and not support you?
You're breaking up a little bit.
See what you do and the important message that you share. I think it's incumbent on all of us to support what you're doing in order to get from this moment into a movement.
Yeah, I wish that some of these sayings, I wish, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes.
Okay. I wish some of these sayings that you talk about I wish that some of these sayings you're referring to could reach the same level as what the scripture does. I don't know why we can't let present day wise sayings be as important as what's in that holy book.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. He's a modern day prophet. He's a modern day prophet, just like Abraham Joshua Heschel, just like Carl Sagan and Einstein. These are modern day prophets, and you're right. They speak to us in our time. The prophets of old are timeless, and we cherish them, but you're right. There's modern day prophets, and we should pay close attention to what they're telling us. Another great quote by Martin Luther King is that he said, "Our lives begin to end the day we are silent about things that matter." And he's right. A part of us dies. A part of our soul and our spirit dies when there's things that matter and we don't speak up. And so he has some really wonderful quotes and observations. And he saw himself as a modern day Moses, leading his people to the promised land. And he quoted Amos, just like his buddy Abraham Joshua Heschel, let justice rain down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. The two of them were very fond of that quote. Heschel invited Martin Luther King to his home for Passover, and he would have been there, except the engagement was deprived of that by an assassin's bullet, which reminds us of the fact that we still allow maniacs to get their hands on dangerous weapons that can alter the course of history and take some of the best and brightest among us. But he was invited to his home for Passover and never got to accept. So I think that each one of us, in his memory, should accept that invitation and spend time on Passover and other times with people of other faiths, celebrating freedom. Invite people to our Passover Seder who are not Jewish, and join with them in celebrating the liberation. On Passover, we read the words, "Love the stranger as yourself, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And this is also interpreted not just a stranger, but love the person who's from a different culture, a different religion, a different race. Love them as yourself, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. That's what Passover is all about. And that was the holiday that Martin Luther King was so interested in celebrating. With Abraham Joshua Heschel, was celebrating Moses and freedom and deliverance from tyranny. And so Passover is coming up this year. I think we would do well in his honor to invite people from different traditions and different religions and use that as an opportunity to build bridges of understanding and knock down walls of separation, as Dr. King was all about. I think that's his legacy. And I hope that we celebrate his life and not just have a day off.
Yeah.
Where we, go out and buy something. Let's open up. Anybody, other people want to share some comments or thoughts?
Valerie, you want to share anything? Or Jenny?
Well, there's no question that Martin Luther King was a visionary. You know, that goes without even thinking about it. He was a visionary. I mean, he's quoted Moses, he's quoted the Torah. I think what's really sad in this day and age is that the two races, the black race, the white race, the two religions, I don't think that a lot of the youth today realize how significant the link is between the Jewish people and the African American people. I mean, we were the ones, the Jewish people are the ones that really started the NAACP. We were the ones that supported them, that were there for them. And it seems that there's a schism now, that a lot of the young people aren't realizing their own history, modern history, contemporary history, history that's going back 40 and 50 years, which is not a very long time in the scheme of things, realizing how linked the Jewish people are to what's going on now with them. You know, and I don't think that education and the leaders of the African American community are really emphasizing that to the degree that they should.
And Valerie, I agree with you 100%. In fact, when I was asked if I spoke about Star Trek, that message that you just articulated, that's what I hammered home today. That we, African Americans and Jews, have suffered from the same adversaries, same type of persecution. Arguing over who suffered more is pointless and inane. But we both have a common cause in fighting for equality and dignity. And many African Americans forget that Jews were instrumental in NAACP, the Urban League, March with Martin Luther King. Some of the Jews died fighting for civil rights. They were beaten up by thugs. And not just Jews. I mean, many Christians, many really wonderful Christians went down south and spoke out. Not as many of us as should have. We shouldn't lose sight of that. The Blacks and Jews were really, really close. And in fact, there's another quote that most people are not really aware of. And Martin Luther King said, when you talk anti-Zionism, you're talking anti-Semitism. He was a strong supporter of the state of Israel. And according to some of his memoirs, he said, how many African nations are there? There's like dozens. How many Christian countries are there? There's dozens. How many Muslim nations? Dozens. How many Jewish nations? Zero. There's just one. And the one Jewish state, the world begrudges them and says it's going to be destroyed and we're going to wipe them out. Because you have the chutzpah, you have just one little tiny piece of territory in the whole world where Jews are independent. And he felt that every group has the right to be independent and to have their own place. And he was a strong supporter of the state of Israel. And I agree with you 100%, Valerie. The Black leaders, Black community, they don't know their history. They don't really appreciate the close bonds we have. But I was glad to see in the last election, I think there's some healing, and I think that African Americans and Jews and progressive Christians all came together in a way that would have made Martin Luther King proud in order to protect our democracy and to restore dignity for people. So I'm an optimist. I see signs that we're doing better. And Martin Luther King was all about dreams. Yeah. And the Jewish people were dreamers. And we also have the indomitable spirit to work hard to make those dreams come true. So.
Ginny wanted to say something?
In line with what I think.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if you want to hear it. I understand your optimism and all, but I'm really alarmed how the divisiveness is getting worse and how not only anti-Semitism, but anti pretty much everything. And I just don't know what's going to happen to the country. So I understand the optimism, and I've always been optimistic, but I see such an escalation of hate in the media, on the TV, and I just don't know. I just don't know where we're headed, frankly.
Let's go ahead. You wanted to say something, and maybe you can comment on what was just said.
What?
Pastor Fritz.
Yes, with what Sharon said about the education of the young people being aware of our past, and I was just reading where within the anti-Semitic communities or groups, there are a lot of young people in those groups, and that worries. I'm an optimist too, but that kind of concerns me. I know there are a lot of young people that are in touch with what's happening, but the anti-Semitic groups have a lot of young people within those groups.
Right. That's true. And I moved to Indiana from Chicago and a lot of other places, but in Indiana, the groups are really alarming. Their youth are very well organized. They're organizing them, and they are anti-Semitic and anti-Black and anti-Asian, and it's quite an issue. It's quite an issue.
Well, I think what we need to do is to look at the big picture and put this in a historical context. If you look back at the 1940s, Rachel Maddow did this series on Ultra. Anti-Semitism was far worse than it is now. There's a guy named Coughlin who was preaching rabid anti-Semitism. He was like the most popular guy on radio. There were anti-Semitic groups running around, neo-Nazis, people saying we should stay out of World War II. They were called the America First movement, which Trump decided to use their same name, but America First was neo-Nazi. And you had rampant anti-Semitism at that time. When my dad was growing up, he told me that there were areas that he wasn't allowed to live, to work. There was terrible anti-Semitism going on. So yes, it is bad today, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we've lived through periods that were really, really bleak. In the Holocaust, the pogroms. I mean, we've been through these periods, so it shouldn't really come as a big surprise. The reason why I say I'm optimistic is because I do see some signs that the African-American community and the Jewish community are coming together. I also see signs that a lot of people are speaking up now about anti-Semitism. You even got some crazy guy, Santos, is trying to claim to be Jewish when he's not. Usually people want to say, hey, I'm not Jewish. We got people who are trying to pretend that they are Jewish. So let me just share this with you, and I think Pastor Fritz might agree with me, that the reason for anti-Semitism is never really stated. We talk about it, and the ADL is really good at compiling statistics. If you want to know how much anti-Semitism there are, go to the ADL. They'll tell you how many incidents, they'll tell you who's perpetrating it, but they will not tell you the source of it. They will not tell you where it's coming from as far as the true source, and they won't tell you what we can do to actually combat it, other than to just compile statistics and say, isn't this horrible? And Pastor Fritz and I have spoken often about where it's coming from. It's built in. It's built into the very theology of Christianity. And as long as that's the case, and as long as it's politically incorrect to say that, then it's like you have a cancer or a virus that's running rampant and you never get to the source of it. You're just trying to stamp it out without getting to where it's coming from. The same thing with Islam. Islam is a potent source of anti-Semitism. They want to destroy the Jewish state because they say there could be no Jewish state. This is Dar al-Islam. Islam belongs in the Middle East and there can't be any other presence, even though the Jews were there longer than anybody. But Islam is saying, no, Judaism is not a valid religion and you can't be there. And then to complete this triad, Christianity and Islam get this intolerance towards Jews, ironically enough, from Jewish scripture, from the Jewish people, because we came up with this concept about God chose us from among all people, and he ordered us to commit genocide against these other people, and God wanted us to wipe these people out because they didn't believe the right way. Or we were supposed to execute Jewish people who believed in the right God, but didn't practice the religion the right way. So how do we deal with this? Well, we can deal with the symptoms all day long. And then every few decades or so, we'll have more anti-Semitism, more deaths, more suffering. Or we could go to the source and say, these religious beliefs that are teaching that God likes one group better than the other, this sibling rivalry between Jews, Christians, and Muslims over whose imaginary father loves them best, it has to come to an end. And if we don't put on our big boy pants and practice a religion that's actually rational and recognize that there's nobody up there who's choosing one group over another, who's sending one group to heaven and other people to hell, this is nonsense. Until we get over this, then we're always going to be fighting over whose father loves us best. So what do you think about this?
One of the greatest things Christianity could do to minimize religious prejudice is remove the concept of hell. If we had no place to send people who don't agree with us, it would cut down this tremendously. As long as we've got this place for those who disagree with us, it just feeds it. It just feeds it.
Well, how do you do that? Do you propose changing people's minds about it, or just telling them, I know you believe in it, but stop talking about it? I mean, what would you do?
We got to start talking about it, because at this point in time, the bishop of our 4.5 million denomination, she will admit privately that she believes hell will be empty, but she will not say this publicly. Of course, that leads to the idea, well, if it's going to be empty, what's the point of even having the concept of hell? But she will not. I think we're moving closer, but we don't quite have the courage yet to come out and say it.
Because if you say it, you remove one of the main reasons why people go to church.
Absolutely, absolutely. No more fear. My sister just sent me a video of some guy who had this vision of Jesus taking him to hell. And he's going around the country speaking to evangelical groups about how horrible hell is because of this vision that he had, that people really believe that he really did go to hell with Jesus to be shown how horrible it is there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a joke about the woman who's marrying somebody, and she's nervous about the marriage because she says to her mother, I'm kind of concerned about marrying this guy because he's not a believer. And he doesn't even believe in heaven, and he doesn't even believe in hell. So she says, don't worry. After you're married for a few years, you'll start to believe in hell. So we have this belief system that works as far as getting people scared so they'll come into church. Jewish people don't rely on it quite so much. We're not really into heaven and hell, but we have our own ways of thinking that try to get people in based on fantasies, and Islam too. But the cure for all of this, the cure for all of it, is rational thinking and rational religion.
Rational thinking, okay.
We say, okay, where's the evidence? Give me the evidence about heaven, okay? Show me what evidence you have that it exists.
Rabbi, can I interrupt?
In all of my experience, I have never seen fear create love. I have never seen it.
Yeah, you're right. Go ahead, Wendy.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I'm a little late for it.
I think fear created a lot of things, but not love.
I'm a little late for it at this point because you kept wandering in terms of Jews and Blacks.
Wandering Jews.
Having so much in common. But my sister was just telling me today about a book that she had been reading, talking about how in the 30s and 40s, that when, way before then, that after the Civil War, after Blacks became free, that nobody would sell to them or let them live in their, rent to them or lend them money or anything. And that Jews were doing this. They said that Jewish peddlers on the street were the first ones that if Blacks came up to them and wanted to try on a shirt or a jacket or whatever, allowed them to do this and let them purchase from them, but didn't just say you have to buy it. Allowed them to try things on, and just all of those things, that the Jews were the first ones to do it and nobody else was doing it. And that this was right after the blacks were freed. And I had never heard it before. She had never heard it before. I don't know if the rest of you knew that.
You're saying that the Jewish people in the South were more accepting of the black community?
I'm saying that when free slaves, wherever free slaves went, once they became free, the Jews, wherever they were, the Jewish peddlers were the first ones to sell to them. Other people, imagine being free and nobody will let you live anywhere. Nobody will sell to you. Nobody will lend you money. So what good is it to be free if you don't have access to anything anyway? And the Jews were the only ones that they were the first ones to, she started out saying the Jewish peddlers on the street corners, that they were the ones not just, willing to sell to them, but letting them try on clothes. And this is no different than white bathrooms and black bathrooms. If you're having a black person try on something and try on 4 things and buy one that, 3 other white people are going to try, other white people are going to try on those items that they didn't buy, and they didn't have fear, of any of that.
Well, yeah.
They were the first one to do it. I had never heard that. So
at L'Dor Va-Dor, we try to be historically and religiously accurate.
All right.
And we try not to be biased. So in order to get to the heart of this, what we know for sure is that after the Civil War, the blacks on paper were free. They were not free. There were
Right.
horrible injustices and lynching and all types of inequities throughout the South. They were not in any sense free other than on a piece of paper, but in reality, they were not free at all. So that's the first thing. And even today, people argue that they're still subject to a lot of discrimination, et cetera. Now, if you're talking about Jewish people and you ask Jewish sources, then you'll find a lot of people saying only the Jews recognized the equality of blacks and nobody else did. If you talk to anti-Semites, they'll tell you the Jews were the worst of all. They were the ones who never allowed freedom for blacks. They were the worst racists. In fact, they're responsible for slavery itself. It's the Jewish people. So we have to be careful about, did I hear this from some lady or some order?
No,
Where's our information coming from?
Rabbi, it's in a well-known book. My sister
I know, I'm sure it is. But let me just share with you the consensus from a lot of well-known books, not one book or one person or one source, but from many sources and from historians. Okay, historians will tell you that in the South, after the Civil War, there was still rampant discrimination, murders, confiscations, and horrors inflicted on the Black community. It's also true that many Jewish people sympathized with the Black community because they faced the same thing. They were discriminated against too, not as badly, but they had been discriminated against throughout history, and they made common cause. And many Jewish people could relate to it and did not participate in that and were in the vanguard of the effort to speak out on behalf of the Black community for freedom. But there were also many Christians who did also. There were a lot of Christians were involved in the abolition movement, and a lot of Jews. A lot of the Jewish people in the South were very, very intimidated. If you spoke up, let's say they were going to have a lynching or something against a Black person, and you were Jewish and you spoke up, you'd probably be killed too. I mean, I don't think anything about murdering Jews, Christians, anybody who would defend them. So there were a lot of Jewish people who spoke up. There were a lot of Jewish people concerned, but there were also a lot of Jewish people who went along for one reason or another. But in general, this is historical fact that the people who began the NAACP, the Civil Rights Movement, the March for Freedom, who marched with Martin Luther King, there were a disproportionately large amount of Jewish people involved in that struggle. And we can take some pride in that, and that's something that's overlooked throughout history. But we do need to be a little bit careful about forming conclusions based on different ideas that people have, from their preconceived notions.
All right, I'm going to stop talking, but I'm going to find the source and eventually let people know. All right, so
The art of justice moves very slowly sometimes.
Anybody else want to share some thoughts or ideas? We've had a great discussion, and I think we've touched on a lot of inspiring ideas and themes and beliefs of Martin Luther King, which I think are very helpful.
David, did you want to say something? David Herschel? Wait a minute, hold on. Let me unmute you. Go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Okay.
Go on.
I know I'm not a member of your congregation, but I've been intrigued in your rabbi's work, especially, the various lawsuits. And I'm fairly new to Florida. I'm originally from England, but lived in Massachusetts for many years. And I'm actually struggling with the political climate here. And I have, voicing what's been said before, I've got a lot of concern about what is going on politically in this country, and in particular, what's going on here in the state of Florida. Yeah.
We absolutely share your concerns, and more than that, speaking out and fighting back. So I appreciate your articulating them. We're also very concerned about the direction, and we did file the lawsuit for abortion rights, and tomorrow I'll be filing a pleading trying to move this case along because the judge is not taking it seriously, and it's not right. The Religious Freedom and Restoration Act has been used to vindicate the rights of Christians. And when a Jewish congregation brings a lawsuit into the same act, we're treated differently. And we're going to speak up about that. And I appreciate your following this litigation and what's going on, because we need people to be aware of it. And we certainly absolutely share your concerns about the direction that this country is going and the state is going. And here at L'Dor Va-Dor, we'll speak up about it. We'll take action.
Okay, if I could just have a quick follow-up. You've been talking, Rabbi, a lot about taking action, and I'm searching in terms of somebody like myself, what action can any of us take? I mean, I'm tired of letter writing and that kind of stuff, phone calls, and I don't know if there's a lot of people in my sort of situation who are basically, concerned and at a losses, what to do, how to get your voice heard, how to use whatever talents you might have to help the cause, that kind of thing.
Well, let me, first of all, thank you for your concern. Let me just share with you my thoughts on that. There are organizations that share your concerns and are fighting back. And I mentioned in the very beginning, the National Organization for Women is a group that does take a strong position about the direction of this country and about the effort to impose a Christian theocracy, and they're fighting back. Our congregation is fighting back. I would suggest joining organizations like that. There's other groups that are out there fighting for the separation of church and state. Join those organizations. But in addition, as an individual, you can go to meetings, you can speak up, you can be like if a candidate's speaking and they don't reflect your views or they reflect the views that we consider dangerous, go out, listen to them speak and share your ideas, speak up. That's something that everybody can do. And it's not just letter writing, but when you confront them one-on-one and you ask them questions. We do this all the time. We've done this with candidate forums, things. And so you can absolutely speak up and lend your voice. But join with us at L'Dor Va-Dor. We take a stand, and join with other organizations that are fighting back. And we can make some real changes in our society.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry. I'm a little hard of hearing, which makes it a little difficult at times.
Well, I do have a suggestion also. You can listen to this afterwards.
Yeah.
And maybe the next time around you'll catch what I said. But basically, join groups that are fighting for your cause, and go out and meet people who are politicians or other leaders and confront them, and ask them pointed questions, and let people understand who are in the audience your point of view. We have the right to do that in America, and it's a very powerful way of getting our point across.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Pastor Fritz, you want to add anything?
No, I appreciate what's being said. I really do. It's great.
All right, I think it's time to wrap up. We have been here for a while. I appreciate Pastor Aufdencamp, Sharon, thank you for orchestrating this, and everybody else who's here. Thank you very much for joining with us. So just to summarize, I'm not an incurable optimist. I understand that we have some daunting challenges, but as a rabbi and someone who believes in the innate goodness of people and our indomitable spirit to overcome, I believe that we have the tools to overcome whatever we are facing now. And it's up to us. We have the choice of how we want to handle it. And we, as Jews, begin the day in the evening, and then we move on to the morning, because we believe that the darkness is always followed by the light. It's a basic Jewish concept. And so they also say that it's the darkest part of the day is right before the dawn.
Our kids will see a difference. Our kids will see a difference.
They will, based on what we do. Yes.
Absolutely.
They'll see a difference based on what we do. The future is not foreordained. We go in either direction, and it's up to us to choose which direction. It's up to all of us. So let's get busy. All right, let's get busy, and let's make something happen for the good. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.